welcome in. Welcome in. This is volume 21, Drunk on Ice. Got Mark from the one of our fired up writers. So Mark, welcome in. It's good to have you back, brother.
Well, thanks for having me back. We have
Hey man,
quite a few things to talk about here, like
most definitely.
as always.
Yeah. Hey, listen. As bad as this team was, there's always a space and a place for people to want to talk about it. So,
Sure.
um, listen, just on just to kick it off, right? What are your thoughts on the way that this season played out, just from a general perspective?
I think it really kind of went. It kind of went by the same way I expected them to be a little bit better than they were, but that was before they got the news. To go back to the very beginning of camp, Um, they got that bad news about Atkinson. They got that
Mm-hmm.
bad news about Couturier, and um, that was going to make it. It was going to alter things a little bit. I thought that they were going to be better than they were, but once those guys went down, and it was really about the young players pushing forward with Cates, Frost, where they were going to be at. Like they were going to sink or swim with those guys.
Right.
And once they lost the veteran presence that those guys were, and quality veterans. I mean, Cam Atkinson's still a good player. Sean Couturier is a former Selke Trophy winner.
Mm-hmm.
These guys are good players, and once they lost them, and it was on really the young guys to kind of carry it. We were kind of destined for a season like this, I think. But
Yeah.
uh, you know, now they're in the Bedard sweepstakes, and as little of a chance as they may have, they are still in it, and we'll just have to wait and see what happens on draft lottery day and how the ping pong balls fall, so to speak. So
Yeah. I mean, listen, they could be in a worse position,
sure,
right? They've got the seventh best odds. Um, the first three teams, you know, all have between 18 and 12% of winning, right?
right,
But so they're there, but they're gonna need some. They're definitely gonna need some ping pong balls to bounce their way in order to be able and truly, and we'll get into this later, but like truly to jump up into that echelon of there's a couple of guys at the top of this draft that could really be the franchise cornerstone that you can really truly build around.
yeah,
So it was only just apropos that like they played well enough to like sit just outside of
right,
that like and I think and it's something you and I have discussed before a bunch of times about like how the idea that the coach that they brought in did exactly what you thought he was going to do,
hmm
right?
yeah,
He elevated the play of players. He got more out of guys than anyone thought they might get. But in a year where you were trying to increase your odds as much as you possibly can to get into the top echelon of that draft, by doing well and elevating those players and elevating the play on the ice, you pushed yourself like just outside of that, where it's like you almost wish that like Tortorella was the guy that they hired maybe 2-3 years from now.
yeah, yeah, and it's interesting because it's like there's a conversation around, what time is the right time to do those things. And one of the interesting things to me is that like I mean I was like looking at I believe it was the 32 Thoughts podcast, and they had kind of run through the teams
Okay.
recently that are in the draft lottery, and when they got to and they spoke about the Flyers on there as well, but there was when they talked about a team like the Anaheim Ducks, who I think are um, I don't did they finish with the worst?
Worst, yeah.
Yeah, they were the worst team. And their general manager, Pat Verbeek, who was a former player, rugged
Mhm.
former player, and he had kind of addressed their situation where he had felt like their team really lacked this kind of like structure. And whether you decide to do it, and now maybe that's easier to instill that structure when you already have a Connor Bedard on your team, uh,
Right.
or it's like a almost like a chicken and the egg type of thing. Like I don't know which, it,
Yeah, you're right.
it's an interesting conversation, and certainly one we'll find out in the next season, or over the next season, or and beyond that, where like whether or not John Tortorella was the right hire at this point in time. Um, I
Okay.
know that him and Danny Briere feel they had their exit interviews yesterday, I believe, and they talked about there was a lot of talk about roster subtraction for the Flyers,
Right.
and you know, so that's where they'll start before they feel as though they need to add players. There, it looks like they're going to look at guys that won't be a part of the plan for next year.
I mean, to be truthful, Mark, I think that what you're looking at least from my perspective, is you now look at like find the young guys that you can continue to build around and give those guys a chance. I feel like the Phantoms roster, right? They're playing in the playoffs right now, so
Yep.
you can see that there's a certain level of there's enough talent at that level, right? And you know how much of that translates to the next level.
Hmm.
But I think I would rather, right? And right, I know we're all super duper fond of the process in terms of what that meant for the the Sixers. But I think I would rather see like this year, and that's the problem that I had with like a bunch of those guys that they signed. I would have rather just seen a bunch of young dudes and just at least you throw all the cards on the table. You see what you have. You see what the responses are from those guys in those situations. And even if it's a guy that becomes a trade piece down the
Right.
road,
Right.
you at least elevated his play on the ice and you maybe got more out of him. Like I would have loved to see Tortorella with a whole pile of young kids to just say like, let's go figure it out. Let's go figure out who we have that we can keep, that we can build, that we can move on from, that we can maximize in a trade piece. Because I feel like a lot of those like 1 year veteran contracts that they brought in or multi-year they have a pile of bad contracts on this squad right now. I feel like it would have been more prudent to be able to get this out of that roster this year than like finishing with the seventh best odds for the lottery. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, and I one thing that you said there that was I think really apt about like this whole situation for them is I think that's actually the next phase of this. Looking
okay,
at all the things that they've said, trying to read the tea leaves, so to speak, about like what's going on here, and like their next step, I think really is going to be like I think I would expect the Flyers to be a younger team next year, a lot younger, and they're going to put more young guys in positions to succeed. Um, you know, guys like Morgan Frost, Owen Tippett, Joel Farabee, these guys, Noah Cates that stepped up this year, Cam York.
mm-hmm.
Um, these guys are going to be they're going to play key roles next year on this team, and not that they didn't this year, but they're going to get even a larger um, piece of the pie,
Okay,
and they're going to move up some of these other players that they like in their system. Tyson Forrester came up, had a cup of coffee with the team this year. He was very good.
absolutely, yeah,
Um, Oli Lixell was also up here a little bit, a left winger.
right,
He's had a really good year with the Lehigh Valley Phantoms. He's another one. Flyers need help on the left side. He's
mm-hmm.
a natural left winger, I believe, and So he'll be somebody who will probably get a long look, and those guys are really, they're going to be the next wave of guys probably next year. But I don't know if we're going to see. I don't know that Kevin Hayes is going to be back next year. I don't know if Ivan Provorov's going to be back next year. There's a lot of rumors, a lot of smoke around those guys, and it doesn't really seem as though based on what was said yesterday that the Flyers are going to be really quick to throw a lot of money at their problems. They're not going to be looking at high price free agents. They're not going to be in on this high end trade market. I think the term that they used, Briere and Tortorella, was backfill, which I think is going to have to do, which is going to be a lot of cheap veteran bottom six types probably, and they're going to move these other young guys up into larger roles.
I think it's smart. I think it's
Yeah,
a smart, very prudent move to like don't give away big contracts. You're not in a need to sign like you're not your franchise is not in that position right now. And I think it's the quickest way for them to get back to a position of being relevant.
yeah, yeah,
So I love the idea when I heard that stuff come out yesterday. I love the idea of that tactic being taken because it's a completely shift in mindset from anything that we have ever seen with this franchise.
yeah, yeah, and that's another thing too. It's like with the where we were just talking about the contracts and the cap space. I don't think in the cap era we've ever seen the Flyers like weaponize their cap space, where they're kind of using it as like oh, we're not going to use it this year, but we're gonna go young this season. We're gonna have this like upwards of 17-18 million dollars of cap space, and we're gonna wait till something comes along, whether it's a high price free agent or something like that, maybe down the road an Austin Matthews or something crazy,
Yeah.
and they're gonna go then and then spend it that way, which would be really unique because, as you said, I don't think we've ever seen them do that before. And
They need to take the Howie Roseman masterclass.
oh
The
yeah, I
cap
mean,
the cap management. I mean,
yeah,
I mean,
yeah, and
side note, when Jalen Hurts, when that contract came out, and you looked at that compared to Daniel Jones' contract,
oh
so
man,
if I'm the Flyers, right, I'm looking to kind of look around the city because there's
yeah,
a lot of information that can be gained by how the teams in the city have managed the the low point of their franchise.
right, right,
So and the Eagles, they do it, within 5 years, they kind of turn that tide really quickly. The Sixers, that process was a lower, it was a longer burn, right? And the Phillies, right? They go a completely different route, right? And they just realize that they're not good at building their farm system right now, and they're just buying guys, and they're
yeah,
in a position where they can
right,
with Middleton and a bunch of that money. But like, I would love for the Flyers, and I think that's part of what this new management hierarchy is going to provide for this franchise, which is like get as much of this out of it as we can,
yeah,
because I think we're in a position where we can get it right. And I think if they play their cards right, this could be a 3 to 4 to 5 year flip where this town becomes relevant in the hockey world. Because
yeah,
without it, and I had something pop up, you have like the Facebook memories, the time hop stuff that
sure,
constantly pops up. And I had one the other day pop up where it was like a Flyers playoff game. And I can't remember the highlight, but to see that building when this team is at the top of it, as at like the top of the city,
hmm,
the, let's be honest, the city rallies around any team that's at the top of that
sure,
at the top of their game. at the same time, when hockey is relevant in this town, it rivals an Eagles level of importance.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
would love for nothing more than, like, right now, just, on the surface, kind of checking in on the playoffs, to see some of these buildings and to see some of the energy that's in these buildings. I just want hockey to be relevant again. I want
Yeah.
it to be important. I want to be like, I don't want to be sitting here on, April 18th doing the season wrap up show.
Yeah.
Like, I would love for this team to be playing, well into the summer
Yeah.
and really just get their time to shine. But it's going to be a slow burn, and I think that
Sure.
the having the shift in mindset and trajectory on the upper management level, and kind of, not pushing those guys aside, but basically saying, like, go be ambassadors to the franchise.
Right. Right.
We're going to do something a little bit different.
Yeah. And to go back to one of the points you made there about, like looking at the other teams in the city and how, looking at how that is all gone. And it's really one of those things too for the Flyers, I think, where you're like in this position, and like if you look at the Sixers, for example, and you look at how the Embiid situation played out for them, and how some of the other drafts that they had that felt like sure things, whether it was the Simmons draft or the Fultz draft, and it didn't work out that way. And you look at the player that Joel has become, and
Mm-hmm.
how captivating he is, and the level of talent that he has, and it's like there is an element of luck there, like when it comes to
100%.
draft and things like that. And if the Flyers were to win the draft lottery and had an opportunity to draft Connor Bedard, the only thing I can think
Emergency
of,
pod.
emergency pod for sure. We'll have to jump on here right away, no matter what. But if they were to draft Connor Bedard or jump up in this draft, the only thing that it would rival, and I think in the Flyers' history, would have been the Eric Lindros trade, where
Okay.
you're getting this one singular, special, one of a kind athlete, and he can, in some ways, completely transform the franchise.
Mm-hmm.
And and we're going to get into these things. I'm sure we'll do long form later, closer to the
Mm-hmm.
draft. We'll talk a little bit about some players a little bit later on. But I mean, Connor Bedard is the one of a kind player in this draft. But there's a lot of great young players in this draft, and
There really is.
and to pick seventh, it's not Connor Bedard, it's not Adam Fantilli, but there's going to be some good players there that could really be a part of, could kind of be a franchise building block for this team. But if they were to move up in the draft lottery, the only thing that I think could rival it would have been the arrival of Eric Lindros and what that meant for that franchise, or what that meant for the Flyers at that time.
I mean, think about that, though, right? That move completely flips the trajectory of that team at
Right.
that moment, and immediately elevates them into the upper echelon of the NHL. And they
Yeah.
were then relevant, right? Then you got the Legion of Doom, and then they're relevant for, you know, let's just be generous, like the next 10 years, 12
Mhm.
years,
Yeah.
where that's what a guy like that can do. And,
Right.
like, listen, as much as I hate the cross state rivals, right? What do they do?
Yeah.
Right? They suck for a couple years,
Right.
right? And then they get two franchise guys, right? They get Crosby and Malkin, and then the next 10, 12 years,
Yeah.
they're relevant, winning Stanley Cups. Like, that, you have that this league is going to be built on speed and youth and talent.
Right.
And it's something that this franchise doesn't have a whole lot of.
Right.
They need to be young and athletic and fast. Like, everything is everything falls in those categories.
Right.
So it's like you have to start flipping the roster to figure out, all right, who do we have that's young, athletic, and talented, and who do we pair them with? How do they work well with the guys that are on the roster right now? What
Right.
kind of pieces can we flip to maybe make those coordinating moves? And then like you're saying, you put yourself in a position that somewhere down the line, there's going to be a superstar that's going to be on the block to move,
Right.
and now you potentially have the assets to be able to move and pair that transcending talent with a young and up and coming talent.
Right. Right. Yeah, and you know, it's fun to think about, like,
Mm,
even in a year where, things weren't that great. But I mean, again, like, there were young players that did play well this year. Morgan Frost had a great year.
definitely.
I think about his second half. Joel Farabee picked up his game significantly in the second half,
I agree.
and he struggled early on, right, all throughout the first half. Owen Tippett was really good as well, and him and Frost actually, there's a lot of evidence and numbers to back that up, that they actually played really well in their best hockey together on the same line. So that was a good thing. And you know, maybe none of those guys are like those transcendent, players, but
But they could be pieces
they can be pieces, and you
because you're
need,
going to need guys on a second and third and fourth line.
sure, and you need you look at the teams that are playing in the playoffs now. A lot of these teams they roll four lines, and
Mm-hmm.
and they can play, and up and down the lineup they have versatility, they have talent, they have the speed, um, they have enough grit. There's a lot of, there's some things about the old Flyers way that still kind of
Mm-hmm.
survives the game today. But in a skill game today, in the skating game that it is today, um, you know, it benefits you. I mean, we look at players today, like guys like hit free agency at like 29 years old, and they
Right.
get like multi-year deals and deservedly paid, and we look at them like, oh, this guy's going to be 33 when his contract's up, as if that's old. But you know,
Yeah.
but in hockey, you're old, at that age. Like, that's
Yeah.
how
And
young and fast the game is today.
that's the thing I think I need to like keep my eye on is like when I look at like the moves that when you bring in, the Delorier move,
Hmm.
right? When you bring that guy in, right? And the first thing that people say, that's that's a Flyers hockey player,
Hmm.
right? And it always harkens back to like this day of old.
Hmm.
And I always laugh like when with our flagship shows where it's like all the sports, the highlight that we play in the Flyers intro is from one of the Stanley Cup video, the one of the
Yeah.
Stanley Cup victories.
Yeah.
Do you realize that clip is coming on 50 years old?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
That says a lot about like why do we need to flip and change things? Because the last time that you were in, the position to, and not in position, but the last time you're in there and take and actually bring it home,
Right.
it's almost 50 years ago.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
none of us were born.
No.
Like it's listen, unless you're a super duper old head drunk on ice fan,
Yeah.
right? Or somewhere in a cabin in Canada, like you're you're probably you've never seen this team win a cup, which is in this city a travesty.
Right. Yeah. There's been a lot of there's been a lot of near misses over the years
Yeah,
too,
you're right.
with them, and um, you know, uh, like, championship droughts are like a part of sports, I think, and it's here especially. Like, you look at the year we just had, just in Philadelphia sports in general. and how, you know,
All
how
within
close,
100 days.
all within 100 days, and just how close we all, like, they ended up, the Birds with the Super Bowl, the Phillies with the World Series, the Union with the MLS Cup, and
On the same day.
on the same day. And um, it's it's tough, but it's a part of it. And
It is.
you have to find. I had always said, as optimistic as I'm always glass half full. I always
Hmm.
look at it that way. And I had always said, and now I wasn't old enough to remember when they won it. Wasn't thought of yet. Um, and
you and me both.
yeah, and but I always said, like, that I wasn't so much concerned with the last time they won it. I was only concerned about when the next time they won it. And
Gotcha.
and I still feel that way, even though that it feels today that they're further away than they've ever been. Um, this
Mm,
draft, last year's draft, these are opportunities here to get it right this time. And hopefully they do.
I agree. I agree. Give me a guy that really surprised you this year that you have that you think like that's a guy I want to see with this team for the next 3 to 5 years.
I mentioned him just recently, just a couple minutes ago, but Morgan Frost was really, uh, I thought he really, really played well,
Mm,
here, especially in the second half of the season. I thought his game was really encouraging. And it's funny because I look at where they were a couple years ago, with Giroux and Voracek, and it always felt like, with those two players, and having, this elite vision, elite puck skills, but they didn't have it. It never felt like they had, like, a goal scorer with them, like a
mm,
guy who could finish off those scoring plays, at least not in the way that I think we all think of it. Like, there was Wayne
mm.
Simmons and guys, like, kind of like those guys that kind of made their living around the net.
Okay.
And but, like, there wasn't like a sniper, so to speak. They never got the opportunity to play with a player like that here. And it's funny now because Owen Tippett is here. Travis Konechny, I think, is a good goal scorer. He knows, he's good at finding soft spots in coverage,
Hmm.
and finding areas to score in the ice. Has a plus shot. Owen Tippett's got a wicked shot, probably the best shot on the team. And but, like, I think Morgan Frost's game really stuck out to me this year because they really don't have a lot of players on the roster currently that have his vision.
I got you.
Uh, he was able to. He's a pass first player, and he's not overly physical or anything like that, but
Mhm.
he's got great hands, and he sees the ice really well. And his game stuck out to me this year because they really don't have many players like that. And I'm hoping, over, with this draft, this year, that's something that they address, that they're able to get some playmaking type players in here, and guys who are, like, able to get players like Tippett the puck where they need it to finish off scoring plays, because guys like Tippett and Tippett, Konechny, Farabee, these guys, they have good enough shots and have good enough hockey sense where if you get them the puck in a good spot, they're going to finish it off. But the Flyers don't have a lot of guys at present, as they're presently constructed, that can get them
No.
the puck there.
No,
So
and when that's the case, right, then it allows teams to zero in on the guys that can
sure,
even if it's on the most like minute levels. They're like, all right, well, that's their best guy, even though that guy is not like insanely elite. We
right,
can zero in on that guy. But like the guy for me, right? Owen Tippett is a guy that I don't necessarily. It wasn't like a surprise,
hmm,
but it was unknown. I didn't
right,
know. We didn't get a huge sample size with him after the Giroux trade. At the end of last season. Um, but I think now seeing him, for a full season, he's third in the team in scoring, right?
yeah,
And a guy that knows how to shoot the puck, man. The guy can really just fire it from anywhere. Um, And I think moving forward, that's something you're going to need. You're going to need a guy that's going to be able to put the puck in the back of the net from anywhere you want to go. So,
Yeah.
And knowing that you got a valuable piece out of that Giroux trade, because let's just be honest, right? Anytime you make a trade, if you're giving up the best guy, I feel like you ought to, like, the team that gets the best guy in the trade, that's the team that wins the trade.
Yeah.
So like I look at him and I'm like, okay, he may not have been the best guy, but he's a guy, and he's a guy that we can kind of build around. So it's nice to know that you did get something back that is going to be valuable moving forward.
Yeah. And he was really great this year.
I agree.
I believe the team awards. So then I think he won most improved player on the team this year out of the team awards.
If I remember correctly, I think so.
Yeah, and you know, justifiably so. I mean, he was great, and he he does make that deal look a lot better. You know, for for a player that um, you know, we knew. I don't even know that Florida really knew. He was former first round pick, but it wasn't sticking there. He wasn't. I don't know that he was getting a ton of opportunities there. I
I
know
feel
he
like
had
he
been up
kind of
and
got
down.
buried.
Yeah, he kind of got buried on a deep team, and that's another thing the Flyers actually have working in their advantage for next year, if they're able to
Mhm.
to look and kind of get better in the in between the margins, or so to speak, where there may be a player that becomes available or maybe flies under the radar a little bit, and maybe they just need that ice time to flourish, and the Flyers will have ice time to give. Uh,
Yeah, so
because
it'll be a good flexible spot for them to
yeah,
be in.
so, but he was really good this year. Noah Cates was another one. Cates was
Yeah, you're right.
he was really good. His defensive impacts as as like a two-way stalwart. For a kid too that they moved. He's a natural left wing. They moved him to center, and
Okay. Yeah.
that could be a difficult transition for guys sometimes. And I don't know that Noah Cates has a lot of experience at center, and he was really really good, and that's exciting for next season with a healthy Couturier back. We know what he's capable of doing at both ends of the rink. You get him with and you have Cates kind of as the pivot on one line and having Couturier on the other. You might be able to really kind of shut teams down. Maybe you're not scoring a ton, but you're not giving up a ton either.
Yeah,
So
and I think that's going to be something that they're going to want to focus on as they move forward, because you're going to look at trying to protect Carter Hart as much as you possibly can.
sure.
So not leaving him open to be exposed on a night in night out basis. That to me has got to be like a close second in terms of like, yes, we want to see what these guys have, but we also don't want to put Carter Hart in a position where he's got to stand on his head,
Yeah.
every single time he goes out and plays.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as far as I thought, Hart was this was a pretty good consistent year for him.
It was.
I think
I
last
was
year,
very happy.
yeah, and as you said, as you alluded to there, Don, like about look, goaltending's tied to so many things, and the play that happens in front of them, and you if you're a goalie and like you're a team, you're the team in front of you is giving up opportunities in like prime real estate on the ice in between the dots or
Mm-hmm.
backdoor plays, or like you can't do anything about those things. You
No.
know what I mean? Like, um, yeah, on occasion you may see somebody like you may see him, go post to post and like completely like rob somebody,
Mm-hmm.
but you can't expect that every night. And you have to play. You have to play within your, your system's play, and help him out a little bit. Um, and but he played really well this year, and I think as this team improves, as a group, um, we'll see his numbers will they'll go up. You know, the save percentage will go up, the goals against will go down, and you know, he'll be fine. You know, the best is still yet to come for him. I sometimes I
I
think
agree.
I think we forget just how young he is because he's been here a little while.
It's kind of crazy.
But he's still, you know, I'm a big believer in Carter Hart's talent.
Oh, 100%. Mark, anything else you want to touch on with the Flyers before we'll take a commercial break and then we'll come back. We'll talk. All right.
Von C. Brewing Company is a 20-barrel, 16,000 square foot microbrewery with a 2,500 square foot tasting room, including a spacious outside beer gardens in Norristown, PA, in the heart of Montgomery County. The Von C. family is part of the family that started C. Schmidt and Son Brewing in 1860. Stop in Wednesday through Sunday and taste a variety of draft and 16-ounce cans of originally brewed beer and tell them the Drunk on Broad crew sent you. Von C. Brewing is located at 1210 Stenbridge Street, Suite 300 in Norristown. Cheers.
Team Clicks are the only glasses for real sports fans. With interchangeable arms, you can support all of your favorite teams, or even make and create custom options as well. These die-hard sports fans have realized that sports fans needed something other than face paint to show their love and passion for their teams. Go to teamclicks.com/DOB and show your love for your hometown team.
La Torrance curated collection of men's and women's watches is a perfect investment that lasts for years to come and fits perfectly with your every outfit and style. Our range of classic watches aren't just a great perfect formal and casual accessory, but a time machine that takes you back to memories. Explore our collection of timeless watches that can reflect your taste, personality, and personal style. Our exclusive collection of carefully curated, affordable luxury watches is what you need to make a personalized style statement. You can take pride in your prized possession, handing it over to the next generations as your most loved asset that they can also own and display with the same pride. These high-quality pieces stand the test of time, giving exceptional value and return on your investment. Go to la-touraine.com and use code DOB at checkout and get 10% off.
If you're looking for unique sports apparel, check out Streaker Sports. They've dug deep into the archives and have brought back some incredible defunct team logos and have even created entire defunct league collections. They also have collections paying homage to sports culture, including the Miracle on Ice, Slap Shot, Caddyshack, the Mighty Ducks, and even have a license with Wiffle Ball and USA Hockey. Only for Drunk on Broad listeners, use code BROAD at checkout to get 10% off anything at streakersports.com. Again, that's 10% off anything at streakersports.com with discount code BROAD.
Welcome back. Welcome back to the Drunk on Ice pod. We got Mark in with us today. So, Mark, where we left off, let's touch a little bit on the draft. So the draft lottery selection will be on Monday, May 8th at 7 p.m.
Okay.
So that's the day we break out every single lucky charm we possibly have.
Yeah.
If you got lucky socks, eating lucky charms that day, whatever you got to do. But yeah, so the draft lottery is held on May 8th, right? So now if I go and look, we start, right? Anaheim is going to be at the top. Actually, you know what? I can probably just share this. There we go. Hold on. Excuse the. There we go. All right. So we're going to share the screen. Here we go. There we go. Right. So we got Anaheim, right, is at the top. They've got the 18% chance of winning the lottery. Columbus right below them at 13.5. The Blackhawks at 11.5. San Jose at 9.5. Montreal at 8.5, and then Arizona at 7.5. And then you got the Flyers at 6.5. Like we're saying, right? So you're saying there's a chance, right?
Yeah.
You got to, at the very least, you got to hold out hope that, couple of things, kind of start bouncing your way. You get an opportunity. So in your mind, where is the place that they would need to get to in order to be able to say that they could get a really impactful franchise player? If you had to say there's a range between 1 and,
I would say anyway, the players 1 through 5 are really, really special. I think the talent level, like you're talking like top flight players in the league. Bedard's a one of a kind talent. It's funny because Adam Fantilli is right behind him, University of Michigan product. He's outstanding. He's having
outstanding with a little bit more size, maybe, right?
Yeah, he's a bigger guy.
6'2", 195, but a guy that, by the time he's full-fledged NHL guy is probably, north of 200 pounds.
Yeah, he's a big he's a big skilled kid. Michkov from Russia. They're talking about. There's a lot of discussion around him about even potentially falling out of the top 5.
Okay.
Due to the situation in Russia and things like that. And that would throw, if that were to happen, you're talking like, he's putting up numbers in the KHL, I think, for that like rival Ovechkin's at a similar age.
Yeah.
And
it does give you some pangs of really, really elite level Russian hockey.
Yeah. And in another draft, like if it wasn't the Bedard draft, I would imagine he would be same thing for Fantilli as well. These guys would probably be first overall picks if Connor Bedard wasn't in their draft class. But I would imagine if Michkov were to fall out of the top 5, that would change a lot of things for a lot of different teams. The Flyers obviously would be affected, and they would have to weigh a number of different things. Because it isn't just about the talent. There's this like level of risk that comes along with him. I believe he's under contract as well with his KHL team. I want to say it's either he's under contract till either 2025 or 2026. So you're waiting, but you're really not waiting any longer than you would for a normal, prospect that doesn't have that upside.
Right.
It's just about everything else that's going on over there at the moment, and but that would throw a monkey wrench, I'm sure, in a lot of teams' plans if he fell out of the top 5.
Yeah, you're right.
But another player is Leo Carlsson. He's really highly touted, and with good reason. He's another like size skill combination type of player. I believe he's a centerman. So. There's some good players there, and then in that range where like the Flyers just are currently at 7th overall, if they were to not move up or fall back, they would get an opportunity to draft a really good player as well there. Oliver Moore, United States Developmental Program, I believe he's a Minnesota kid. Highly talented, very gifted. Will Smith is another one.
I was going to say Will Smith is another guy who's kind of just consistently stayed in, like when you look at the pre-draft rankings, like when they're consistently ranking these guys.
Yeah.
Between Bedard Fantilli and Smith, those guys have been consistently right at the top of, Bedard has just been a static one,
Right.
but those two have been right behind him pretty much the entire time.
Yeah.
Matthew Wood is another guy that's kind of risen up a little, the draft board a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think, size might have a lot to do with that, right? The opportunity to get a young kid who's 6'4", 195, that is going to play, could play right wing for you.
Right.
There's one thing you can't teach size.
Yeah.
Right. So, when I think there are going to be teams that are going to see guys that are enamored with size and talent.
Right.
And those guys are going to be guys that have kind of risen, right? The other kid that I look at is like, Braden Yeager, who's a guy that's kind of dropped a little bit.
Right.
The pre-draft ranking was, in the top 5, and now he's sitting at like 11. So it's like, that's where I feel like they could be in a really good position to get another, like, to just continue to start stockpiling really good talent. And
right.
Not to make another analogy back to another team in the city, right? But with the Sixers, you just you give yourself as many bullets as you possibly can in the hopes that, like, you hit on somebody. Because in that draft, the Embiid draft, the Sixers, if Embiid is healthy, Embiid is going number 1.
Right.
And they have he never falls to 3.
Right.
So, like, is there a situation where something, health aside, is there a situation where one of those guys, for whatever reason, teams just decide to go a different direction, and then you start to see a guy slide, and you're like, oh, the pool of players where we're picking is a lot deeper than I thought it might be.
Right. Yeah, and that's what I mean with like the Michkov thing. Like, if that were to happen, that, like, the Flyers would be probably one of those teams that would have to they'd have to heavily consider that. Even with all the other even with all the other problems. Or not problems, but, like, there's like baggage there, and you have to kind of
I think baggage is the appropriate term.
Yeah. You have to think about those things, and it's such a, Briere had said this recently, like what a critical pick this is for the organization. And I like early returns on last year's pick with Cutter Gauthier, and
I mean,
he's going back to college another year, but it's Flyers are in for a multi-year process, so no need to rush him.
I don't think there's any, like you're saying, I don't think there's any rush to get him here.
Right.
As long as he continues to just be there and be productive, and they know that he'll transition to this organization at some point.
Right.
I do. I think you're right in saying, like, the early returns on him they're all positive. They're all pointing in the right direction.
Yeah. And he's like we were just talking about some of these other guys like Fantilli and all. Cutter's one of those players, size, skill combination. He's a big kid. He can skate.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a wicked shot. And all the tools are there for him to be an effective, like, top 6, versatile top 6 forward. And so this year's pick is just as critical as that one was. Especially when you're picking, you're inside the top 10. And in the Michkov case, you're really kind of, you would rather not, I'm sure, have to weigh those kinds of things with a pick inside the top 10, because you want it to be as much of a sure thing as possible, because you really need to hit on those picks. We saw the year that they jumped up in the draft, and they jumped up to number 2, and they had the opportunity to take either Nico Hischier or Nolan Patrick. Devils take Hischier, Flyers get Patrick, and not hitting on that pick, you can see how that is plays a part in where they are, why they are where they are.
It really does.
So, it's anytime you're inside the top 10 or top 5, it's a really, really essential that you get a high level player out of that draft. And for the Flyers to have to uh, all the things that are going on, it would only happen, I think, in a draft where the Flyers would have to, you know what I mean?
It would.
Would have to like consider that, but they won't be the only team that has to.
Yeah.
And
No, you're right. I mean, we had this city has had a pile of false messiahs at the top of the draft. So
yeah,
we,
so it's true.
that's another show for another story for another day.
I was just gonna say, Don, we could do a whole show on former
so
top picks for all of our teams. It's crazy.
I keep saying I'm trying to sell. I don't know anybody that makes 30 for 30s or movies or anything, but like
Yeah.
you could make a really good sports documentary and
Yeah.
call it The False Messiahs.
Yeah.
Right? Between Nolan Patrick, Carson Wentz, like there is literally an endless list of Phillies prospects of guys
Yeah.
that they, the Cornelius Randolphs of the world. Like it's a diatribe. I really don't know if I'm ready to scratch that wound open just yet. I'm gonna
Right.
try to keep it positive for this draft, maybe.
Yeah.
And Mark, correct me if I'm wrong. When they do the ping pong balls, do they do it like the NBA draft? Like it's just the first. I know the NBA lottery is the first 3, and then everybody else slots by record. Do you know if it's done in a similar way?
I think everybody. I want to say the top 10. I think everybody in the top 10 had could feasibly. I don't know that it's just by record.
Okay.
I now that we're talking, I'm not sure. I don't think that it's the same way as the NBA draft.
Okay. All right. So So they changed. So only the bottom 11 teams are eligible for the number 1 pick.
Okay.
Teams can jump a maximum of 10 spots up to number 1. Thus, if the 16th worst team in the league wins the lottery, they would only jump to number 6.
Okay.
So they can only move 11 spots.
Right.
But they're okay. So teams are randomly assigned 4-digit combinations that are computer generated. The number of balls placed in the lottery. They do lotteries in 15-second intervals. The team with the winning combination is awarded the pick.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
But then the numbered balls are returned and they repeat the process for the next pick. So they do that for the same thing. They do that for the first 3 picks. And then every team after those 3 teams are identified, it's in corresponding order of record.
Yeah. Okay.
So if I go back and I look, like they could obviously jump up anywhere above them, up to number 1. The only way that they would pick worse than 7th is if there's a team behind them that jumps up.
Okay.
So like if, the teams behind them, Washington, Detroit, St. Louis, Vancouver, that's it, because they can only jump 10 spots. So as long as, if any one of those teams below them jumps up to that top 3, then they would pick that draft slot would slide back.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
and that's
yeah,
that's
fingers crossed.
Another thing about teams that are eligible for, Washington's behind them and they're in the Flyers division. So that, you don't want. Columbus is also in their division and you don't they're I think have the third. Oh, second.
Yeah, they're the second.
So
Anaheim, Columbus, and Chicago.
Okay. Yeah.
Are the 3 teams that have the highest chance.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, we're talking, we're talking a lot about, the possibility of us jumping up, the Flyers jumping up and having the opportunity to draft Bedard, but we also don't want Columbus and or Washington to get that opportunity either. and have to, see another superstar level player in their division for the next, decade plus. So
At the very least, the Penguins cannot jump up to that slot.
yeah, I think
So there's
Pittsburgh's
a le-
they're all out of luck. They're on the back end of this thing. They should be paying hard for all the all the fortune they've had.
seriously. Well, listen, to jump on the opposite end, right? Before we
Mhm.
jump out of here, the playoffs kicked off, right? I think the level of play, playoff hockey is a whole different animal. What do you love about playoff hockey before we jump into any of the matchups?
I still think I say this often to people, and growing up, being a fan as a kid, and I remember one of the things I always remember about the NHL growing up. I always remember seeing the commercials, the old coolest game on earth ads for the
Wow.
NHL, and growing up watching it, I really thought it was. Football. You look at a sport like football in the NFL. Football could be, the best sport. Baseball could be America's pastime and all those things. But the coolest game on earth, that's professional hockey. And
That's cool. I remember
and
that's awesome.
yeah, and that's how I always felt. It's the ultimate Iron Man tournament. It's a war of attrition every year. It's some of the best form of drama that we see in sports. It's the most physical, and just like it's this really it's a war. It's a tournament of attrition, really, and that's it's one of the few things I think still in professional sports. The NCAA March Madness tournament still has that feeling where at the beginning of it starts and it feels like, man, anybody could take this. And
Yeah, I think what I love and what you kind of mentioned was like everything has meaning in the
yeah,
playoffs.
hmm
There's not every shift, every pass, every shot, every save, every penalty. Everything has this elevated level of importance that because that moment, that play, that shift, that missed pass, that missed shot, the open net that you missed that hits the puck, all of it has meaning.
yeah,
All of it can translate to putting that team in a position to win the game or lose the game, and to live and die on every shift. It really just it's a whole different level of reality television. Like
yeah,
sports is reality TV. It's the best form of reality TV.
yeah,
But when it gets to the playoffs, and you see that a lot in playoffs, right? You
hmm
could probably take that same sentiment and put it across, but I think in hockey, it takes on a whole different level of just the magnitude is so much bigger.
sure,
So I love so even to look at the side with the West, right? To see the fact that Vegas and Seattle are both in this early in their franchise history, to see how those two teams have kind of just said, we're just going to build it. We're not going to slow build it. We're going to be relevant early.
sure,
Building the franchise, I think that's a super smart strategy.
yeah, yeah, and it's they've been really successful with it. And if you want the sport to grow in these like non-traditional markets, and you put a pro team there, that is the best way to do it. You have to be right out of the chute. You have to be competitive, and you have to give people a reason to come to the rink every night. And both those teams have done that to this point. And Seattle kind of took a slightly different approach than Vegas did. where, the first year wasn't that great, but they were building up a bit of some equity in that prospect pool. And now
Mhm.
it's like, whereas I think Vegas is a little bit more of a veteran laden team. Seattle's a little bit younger. And, so two different forms of roster building there, but both effective.
Yeah, I mean, to see them this relevant this early just is insane.
Yeah.
And then to look at kind of the top and bottom of this, right? It seems like the Oilers are incessantly in this top echelon of the Western Conference, and then it just never translates to really getting them into a position where they can win a cup. And it's amazing to me that you can have the level of talent that you have at the top of that roster, but the disparity between the top and the bottom of that roster
Sure.
is so dramatic between like the top and then the rest of the guys.
Sure. Yeah. And, they're at a point now where like that's kind of, they've been there the last few
Mhm.
years, Edmonton. So it's, they're getting to that point where it's kind of like, as much as we marvel at Connor McDavid, I'm sure there's a little bit of, and the Kings won game one the other night.
Mhm.
And there's pressure on that group now where it's like, kind of like, yeah, it's fun to watch Connor McDavid play. Who doesn't like watching him play? But, it's kind of like, it's going to become one of those things where it's like, what have you done for me lately soon? And,
It's true.
if for as great as, and I think their group is a lot better this year than they've been. I like their defensive core a lot better this year. I think they're deeper. I still think they need a goaltender, but you look at the year that he's had, and Draisaitl not that far behind.
No.
They're always a threat. But the Kings have a good group too, and they're one of the few teams I think in the West that could actually skate with them. So
Listen, it's anybody's. Like, I feel like the West is kind of wide open. I feel like
yeah,
there's a handful of teams that are, you could make a case that they would come out of the West. Now, listen, in the East, I feel like it's kind of super chalky to say, give it to Boston and let give them just kind of the fast track. They just probably had one of the most impressive seasons probably in NHL history.
yes, it was. What a year, and the fact that, like, I love seeing them go all in just as a hockey fan this year, knowing that I don't know how much more time they have with Patrice Bergeron, or David Krejci, and to see them kind of load up for one last run with those guys, they deserve it. And Boston's a really, really tough team, and even with the rumors of, well, it wasn't really a rumor, but they're, they had been, they had like a little bit of a stomach bug going through the locker room, a virus or something like that. You couldn't tell the other night. They
No, not at all.
went without a hitch, and it's just a testament to how deep they are. So they're all in for this year, for
If you
sure.
had to
So,
pick a team in the East outside of Boston,
I think it's Carolina. I
Okay.
love the Canes. They're my pick actually to go to the Cup out of the East this year.
Okay.
I think Rob Brendamore is the best.
I mean, for me, right? Like, I'm looking at, it's going to be super. I'm gonna go super chalk, but I'm gonna say, like, I love Boston and I love where Vegas comes in. So I think the matchup of Vegas and Boston together, I think could be a really really cool uh, dynamic matchup in the playoffs. But listen, we shall see. We will check back in. We will reconvene in a couple weeks with another episode of Drunk on Ice. Really, really appreciate everybody tuning in, checking in, and we'll see you on the back end. Go Philly, go Sixers. Hopefully the Phillies turn it around, but we'll talk to you on the back end, Philly. Later.
This is the Broad Street Line, where Philly sports fans leave all of their sports hot takes. Call 267-405-3062 and show us your passion for Philly sports. Don't forget to tune in every Wednesday at 8:30 when we listen to your live reactions to the thrill of victory or the agony of defeat.